want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. My name is Fred Litwin.
Noted author Fred Litwin. And of course, Fred is also the author of I Was a Teenage JFK Conspiracy Freak, On the Trail of Delusion, and Oliver Stone's Film Flam, The Demagogue of Dealey Plaza.
Fred Litwin is here. He's a longtime author and certainly watcher of politics.
Joining us, Fred Litwin. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, welcome to another edition of On the Trail of Delusion, where I try to separate the wheat from the chaff and try to give you something substantial on the JFK assassination rather than some of the usual nonsense that you find on YouTube or on other parts of the internet. So today my special guest is Brian Roselle, who is a chemical engineer who's been studying the JFK assassination since the 50th anniversary. So Brian, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure and a great opportunity to talk with you. I like some of the variety of discussions you have. It's really good. Yeah, somebody else recently asked me about my background and how I got interested in JFK and research, and specifically JFK research. So, and I jotted down some notes for him. So I'm just going to read those notes, kind of my background bio, and it'll give a good, I think, cross-section of my background.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go ahead and read those notes right now. I'm originally from Lincoln, Nebraska. And I recall the day, 11/22/63, I was in fourth grade in John J. Pershing Elementary School. And I remember the events that day quite a bit, and the weekend, the funeral on Monday and everything. I think that afternoon they brought in the old big box, black and white CRT TVs with rabbit ears and all that. But at some point they let us go home early. And I remember when I was walking home, I was just in a big daze. I didn't know what it meant. I was 9 years old. So I was kind of confused. And when I got home, I went downstairs. My mom was ironing, and she did not have the radio or TV on. And so she asked me, what am I doing home early from school? And I said, the president had been shot, been assassinated. And she couldn't believe it. She was just like, I think she was a little, irritated with me. She thought I had made that story up as a reason to, explain why I was getting home and leaving school early. And nowadays I'm thinking, well, yeah, come on, Mom, how would I make that story up? But that was the start. I remember specifically that day, and it was pretty impressive. I then went to the University of Nebraska, and I was thinking about biological sciences like entomology. I worked a couple of summers for a chemical company doing research and development on corn rootworm control in the Great Plains. So it was related to entomology and bug control on agriculture. So I was kind of a high plains drifter driving around back then. And that was that was around the time it was 55 miles an hour mandated, and that's when I had a CB, and I used to handle a Herb-Husker, which I've hung on to quite a while. I ended up majoring in chemical engineering because I got a lot more interested in the math and the physics and the engineering and the R&D aspect of that summer job as opposed to entomology. I worked a couple years in Oklahoma as a refinery process engineer. I got re-interested in doing product R&D, so went back to grad school at Missouri for another chemical engineering degree with the intent to move into consumer products research and development. So I worked my career at a large consumer products company in Cincinnati here as a R&D scientist / engineer, and worked on developing consumer cleaning products mainly for local and international markets. So that's kind of the research background. I really didn't do much on the JFK front all the time until the 50th anniversary. My older brother Bob kept me up to date on stuff, but on books and theories, but I didn't do anything until the 50th. There was a lot of programs on TV, and I was watching, and one of them showed the John Connolly's reactions and said those were startle reactions, and that's how they determined with a little film blur that that's when the first shot occurred. And I looked at his reactions there, and I said, doesn't look right. It really bugged me. So I started to dig into the JFK research at that point. I started looking at Connolly's observations, his reactions. That led into investigation and research on human reactions, voluntary and involuntary, and then did some modeling and did a journal article with Ken Sears on the first shot timing, and that led to a conference presentation I did a couple years, like within 2 years ago, and I talked about first, second, third shot timing. One of the dilemmas was I had so much material to cover, I could only do so much on the first shot, and I realized after that I didn't give enough information on the first shot because some people were confused. They didn't understand the what I did, the methodology. One guy, he didn't know how the heck it could work without using any eyewitness or ear witness testimony to determine the first shot. And he, he thought it was like what I call a wagwab, a wild ass guess without any basis. So I realized I probably should get more information on that. So this presentation I'm going to do today is more only on shot one. I dropped off shot two and three, but I wanted to add in a little more information on shot one. So
Okay.
that's kind of where I'm going with it. So I'm going to do.
Okay, sounds
All
great.
right. What I'm going to do here is this is on the development of a forensic technique based on the science of human reactions, used to more accurately pinpoint the timing of the first shot in the Kennedy assassination. I broke the review down into organized into three sections. One is background. I'm going to give a little more background on the first shot, historical first shot estimates, startle and voluntary reactions, early observations in the Z film, and sound localization, and how that might play a role. The second section is development of a mathematical model from historic reaction time data and how it's used in determining the first shot timing. And lastly, there's some alternate checks used to validate that model, that it is reliable and did correctly predict the first shot timing. And I'll at least point one of those out. May not have time to do all of it. So why do this? An accurate timeline is critical to understanding crime scene events and can help identify other key evidence that you might miss. Gardner and Bevel in their book Crime Scene Analysis and Reconstruction say to ignore aspects of chronology, timing and sequencing aspects in crime scene analysis is to ignore what is often half of the data available to us. Timing and sequencing relationships exist throughout the scene and are often critical to the overall analysis. And I think I've seen what they're saying there is that when you get the timing right, it kind of can focus you in other directions and give you other insights.
Right.
So here's a little background on the first shot timing. So it's like the first shot timing, Z frame is the y-axis, the year is the x-axis. So it kind of starts out with the Warren report. They didn't really specifically say an exact first shot timing and all that. They did favor Z210 based on testimonies. JFK's arm and hand motion around 210 was suspicious, and the sniper line of sight then just cleared the tree. A little later, a few years later, Alvarez and Wyckoff pegged Z180, 186 as the first shot timing based on testimonies, jiggle analysis, a brief tree opening at that point, but probably still tree branch deflection. Around 1978, 79, the HSCA picked around Z157 as the first shot timing, based again on testimonies, jiggle analysis, John Connolly's startle reaction, some acoustics, and the limo was not yet to the tree branches, but the tree still might have played a role. A little later, in around 1992, the failure analysis in the ABA mock trial picked Z166 based on testimonies, probable tree deflection, and the limo just started to be obstructed by the branches of the trees there. A little later on, Bugliosi's book, he picked Z160, again based on testimonies and John Connolly's startle reaction. So you can see it's kind of like it was level for quite a while since the HSCA. Holland Rush in 2007 picked an earlier point at ZEQ 107. When I say EQ in this presentation, it means the equivalent Zapruder frame if the camera had been running constantly before Z133. So on the basis of that, again, with some other testimonies and a probable traffic mass deflection. And then in 2020, it's an article, this is the one I was involved in with Ken Sears, on is an estimate at ZEQ 124, about a half a second before Z133.
Right.
And that basis is based on the start of 7 simultaneous voluntary reactions seen around the limo early in the Z film. So various estimates up to 2020 all included select testimonies to help confirm their estimates. But the estimates ranged over 100 frames from like Z107 to Z210. So it's like, that's a wide range of estimates. Although various testimonies supported the limo location estimates, spanning 100 frames, and that might seem excessive, researcher interpretation can even cause that much variation on one single testimony. So I'm going to tell you how the watch-outs of just what testimony will do. The challenge really is for the researcher in interpreting eyewitness testimony on President limo location, where no quantitative positioning is available. So for example, and this is probably one of the more commonly heard first shot testimonies I heard when I started researching. It's like, I heard it a lot. They had just turned the corner and straightened up and heading down towards the underpass. So there's a lot of people basically said that around the first shot. Here estimates, here I'm going to show some estimates of plots of the presidential limo position in the motorcade, about 40 frames apart in time. Just 40 frames is just to spread them out. These are from a Michael Russ estimates on the limo position in the Dealey Plaza. So on this plot, the red circle is the limo position at about 205, which is, close to what the Warren Commission was saying. This next one, this is the position of the limo at Z163, which is closer to the HSCA's estimate on it. Alvarez and Wyckoff was like in between these two. Here's the limo position at this is just randomly Z121, and it places it 40 frames earlier. And then even some people thought that it was around Z79, where, down around Tina Towner's film, that's when the first shot happened. So you can see, based on this one common testimony, very common testimony, all these could be legitimate interpretations for an estimate on the first shot timing. And the testimony alone could be used to support a first shot at any of these points. So on this one, had they just turned the corner, straightened up, and headed down towards the underpass? Yes. Had they just turned the corner, straightened out, heading down to the underpass? Yes. Had they just straightened out, heading down to the underpass on the third one? Yes. Had they just straightened out, heading down to the underpass on the fourth one? Well, maybe they might have been just turning there. But the point is, it's like every one of these could be interpreted as the first shot. So what is the best interpretation on what the witnesses really meant? In this diagram, the range covers a half a block and about 130 frames. So this really influenced me in an effort to find a different method that does not require or use any eyewitness or ear witness testimony. So before we get into that new method that I'm going to talk about, this reviews some background on startle involuntary reactions. This is just sort of background to familiarize people with what I'm talking about. I probably didn't do that good enough in the previous presentations. But basically, here's just some bullet points. Startle reactions are pre-programmed involuntary movement after stimulus, no complex planned motions involved, thought to have evolved as a protective mechanism in humans. For sound, it typically requires a loudness of about 90 dB or more. The extent of an individual startle reaction can be proportional to the loudness. The louder the sound, the little more the bigger the startle might be. There is a short latency after the stimulus sound before movement starts, with the movements cascading from the head down to the body. It kind of cascades down your spine and affects the muscles that way. With an estimated of about 100 milliseconds latency, then 110 milliseconds for the onset of motions below the neck. This would account for about a 210 millisecond latency after stimulus to when you should start to effectively see startle motions occur. For startle reactions, the body joints move in flexion, like flexing a joint, not rotation joints. Therefore, neck joints will tend to bend slightly forward and not have a major side-to-side rotation. Your eyes close, blink, shoulders and arms move up a little bit, head scrunches down forward a little. In adults, this is just an instinctive protective motion, like kind of like the very start of taking a fetal position. The first startle motion in a close sequence of startles is usually the greatest, and subsequent startles can show a lower reaction amplitude, and it's called a habituation, where it kind of goes away over time. Startle motions are typically quicker and are subsiding by the start of the separate voluntary reaction motions. So I'm going to talk briefly about voluntary reactions. These reactions are thought out and controlled. When a movement is complete after stimulus, the whole time can be referred to as perception reaction time, or PRT. Here, initial period with a voluntary reaction, there's a latency after the stimulus called the perception time. And that's followed by a thought out reaction having a separate reaction movement time called RT, reaction time. So the complete time of the voluntary reaction occurring after stimulus arrival is perception reaction time is equal to perception time plus reaction time. PRT equals PT plus RT. The duration of perception time, the time before the beginning of the reaction motions occurred, is significantly influenced by the expectation of the stimulus occurring. So that means the more you expect a stimulus is going to happen, the quicker your reaction time will be to it. And this expectation can range from no expectation, a complete surprise, to a highly expected or anticipated stimulus arrival. The voluntary reaction isn't automatic to a specific stimulus or have a set amplitude like a startle. It can be a various type of voluntary reaction. And it comes from a conscious interest in reacting in some chosen way. Most people will choose to react to a puzzling or concerning event, but they don't have to since it's voluntary. I'm just going to mention there are two cameras recorded early on in Elm Street that both appear to have been influenced by startle and voluntary reactions. Abraham Zapruder's camera. It was a solid, heavy camera with a spring-loaded run button that was kind of recessed, so his finger was very, very well protected and stable in that camera. Elsie Dorman camera was a lighter camera, about less than half the weight of Zapruder's. So it was a little more easier to move around, and the run button was sticking out from the camera, spring-loaded. Your finger had a little bit more prone to slip off that. If I get a chance, I'll talk about some of that later. Back in, I think this was about the mid-'80s, CBS tested the characteristics of a startle reaction and tried to validate the concept of jiggle analysis. The cameramen here and the rifles were positioned to exactly match Zapruder, the sixth-floor window, and in the limo in Dealey Plaza. And the test they ran 3 shots, were fired in succession. The limo here was stationary during the filming, but the cameramen were startled and jiggled their cameras for about a quarter of a second. This 3-shot clips repeat. So I'm gonna play it and just let it repeat. There's going to be 3 shots, reset, 3. But you can look at like the guy in the foreground. You're going to see his arms jerk a little and maybe his head move a little for each shot. And the guy in the background does a similar thing. his arms jerk a little, and then his head jerks a little more on the second shot, and then by the third shot, he's like habituated. You don't see him move at all. So I'll just let it run. You can kind of. So you can see they're each reacting almost the same. The guy in front seems to have a little higher reaction, and the guy behind a little less. But you can see both head and arm motions. And the guy in the background seems to habituate after about the third startle. So this is what the control looked like of their film on the limo. You can see the light sun spots reflecting. They're pretty symmetric and round, and there's not much blur in the film. So that's a control without any gunshot happening. Now, when the gunshot was happening and they were startled, you could see their startle reactions. This one up here had these little, I don't know, they're kind of like a little arrow points on it. So there was a horizontal and vertical camera motion there, and you can see it's a little blurrier. Another frame had more horizontal blurs on it down below. So basically what this said was, the conclusion was a Carcano sound from the book depository could cause a Z startle in a blur in Zapruder's film. A camera acceleration with respect to either a stop or a moving limo can cause a blur to show up. So they kind of proved the jiggle analysis did have some credibility to it. The reactions here are quick and fairly limited, primary flexing in nature, like I talked about, and we don't see any major head rotations occurring like I'm going to show you in a minute with Conley. The film blur vertically and or horizontally could depend on an individual's sensitivity to startle and how his arms and wrists and heads all work together to hold the camera. But you can see the camera jerk around pretty readily here.
Yep.
All right. Now, in this one, this background on early reactions in the Zapruder film is this repeats also, and it shows Conley's reactions from Z156 to Z180. Now, the next three frames I'm going to dwell on a little bit only because this is the point that got me into all my JFK research. That was his rotation head turn from left to right between 162 and 167. This is what I was seeing on some documentaries, and they said that is a startle reaction. Also, the Zapruder film blur seen here, it's right at the very beginning of this clip, 156 to 160, right there. It's blurred, and Conley's head, and this with the Conley head turn reaction, which was presumed startle, are the basis for a Z157 first shot timing by the HSCA. From literature, the HSCA estimated the start of a startle reaction in about 2 to 4 frames after stimulus, which isn't too bad. 2 is a little fast, I think, because the muscle motions hadn't developed quite enough down below the head. But 4 frames is pretty reasonable to start seeing those reactions. I, in fact, used 3.8 frames for Zapruder when I was doing my work. Then using Zapruder's film and specifically his film blurs, they believe the film blur at this 156 to 160 at the very beginning of this clip here was due to Zapruder's startle. This would put the first shot estimate around 154 to 157 based on Zapruder's camera involuntary movement to startle, causing that blur. The HSA also assumed the first and only reaction seen happening around the limo was Conley's motion at 162 to 167. They stated that no one else shows a comparable reaction in this period of Conley's reaction. Now, they subtracted off startle latency estimates for Conley and got 157 to 159 based on Conley's involuntary head rotation startle movements. So based on this, they had a couple points, excuse me, where 157 was looked at for the shot, and they looked at it and supposedly even found it in the acoustic noise, in the acoustic studies. However, Conley's head reactions are not involuntary startle reactions, but were voluntary reactions. And the film blur was from voluntary camera panning errors. And differentiating between voluntary reactions and involuntary startle reactions play a critical role in determining the correct first shot timing. It's useful here to consider a slightly extended view of this, starting just 20 frames earlier of Governor Conley with his reactions from Z136 to 180. His reactions at this time actually consisted of a major his right to left head rotation, immediately followed by that left to right head rotation from 162 to 167. This cascaded continual head rotation back and forth started at Z150. So you can clearly see his head go left and right in the middle of the frame. Now he testified later on that he remembered turning to the right, which he did here. In the hospital with I think it was Martin Agrowski or somebody, his first testimony on his reaction to the first shot was that he said he turned to the left. So there's some confusion about, well, in his memory of what it was. But on film, we can clearly see he's got a left-right head turn. The view of Conley beginning his right to left head rotation was a little obscured here by Kellerman's head as Kellerman leaned over and down to the right at that time. So Kellerman's just sitting right in front of Conley, and you can see he's leaning over to the left, leaning over down, turning his head down to the right. It kind of blocks Conley's head turn to the left. I think maybe that's why, or there's a little damage to one of the frames there. It makes it hard to why they didn't notice Conley's initial head rotation left, and that wasn't noticed. I mean, I just assumed maybe Kellerman got in the way there. Also, while watching John Connolly here, note Jackie Kennedy along the same line of sight in the background. Her reactions are almost identical to Governor Conley's, but her reaction started slightly before his and ended slightly after his. So right here, if you watch Conley, you can kind of see in your side view, Jackie started actually just before him, and finished right after him. Conley just made it a little quicker, but it was almost identical reaction between those two. They both had rapid head motions, but they didn't sustain a look. They had it's not like they were looking at something, because they didn't even stop to look at something. It's like they were looking for something. And the expressions at that time appeared to be more concerning than normal. Now these pictures I'm going to point out here don't prove anything. It's just something that kind of bothered me. It's just kind of a haunting thing here. If you look at the photo in the far bottom right, that's Willis' photo taken their slide number 4, taken around Z133. And you can see there, Jackie's just beaming, smiling. JFK is like either waving or brushing his head back. Nellie is beaming and smiling. I think this is right about after she said to JFK, "Dallas, you can't say they don't love you anymore." And so everyone was like really cheered up. They were probably looking down at the underpass right here, saying, "Hey, we're done. This damn motorcade is over. We're getting out of here. We're going to lunch." Everyone is just so cheerful here. In 1.5 seconds after this, Conley wasn't the most, smiley guy in the motorcade, but he certainly had his worst scowl in this picture, a Croft picture, just 1.5 seconds after this one. And Jackie, when you enlarge that, there seems to be some consternation in her eyes, and that smile just seems it's melted off. Every smile I saw on her earlier in the Dallas visit, she had a smile, and this one just seems to be melting away. And her eyes just, I mean, again, nothing proven there, but there was something majorly appeared to change in 1.5 seconds here. This Willis number 4 slide is probably the last time anyone would ever have seen Jackie's beaming smile like that for a long, long time. So it was just kind of Just kind of a haunting thing. It doesn't prove anything, but it ties into what I'm going to be talking about here. This next slide, I've got on the upper left is a bigger view of the Z film from 133 to 162. It's slowed down with a broader view to pick up a couple more people nearby. There, in this particular one, there was like 155, 156 was had some damage, but you can still see everyone moving. The grid on the top right is a 3x3 matrix zoomed in on six other individuals besides Governor Conley, and they're all showing voluntary reactions, starting within about 0.55 seconds of each other, from Z140 to Z150. So, for example, this this blank grid at the bottom corresponds to the video grid matrix on the top right. So if I click, I'm going to click on this one. This is George Hickey.
Right.
He begins leaning over to the left and looking down in the direction of the rear tire or ground at Z143.5. I'll click on JFK. It looks like he starts a quick look to the left at Z143. Over here, if I click on Jackie, she starts accelerated head turning left at 143.5 before looking back right. Similar to John Conley's left to right head motion, but starts slightly earlier and ends slightly later than his. That's just what I talked about in the previous slide. Go over to John Conley again. I mentioned this. He begins a quick head turn left at Z150, and subsequently he looked back right. And then on the middle row on the far right, it's Rosemary Willis. She begins a quick look back away from the presidential limo, back towards the Texas School Book Depository at Z140. So right as she's coming out of that shadow, you can see her face there, but right as she comes out of that shadow at Z140, she starts that head rotation. So now the lower left corner is Roy Kellerman. Again, he begins leaning over and looking behind down to the right at Z148. Middle of the bottom row, Nellie Conley begins a quick sweeping head turn to the right at Z145. So you can kind of see her head sweeping to the right. It's almost like there's sun shining off her high cheekbones or something. I see a couple white spots, but you can clearly see her head swinging around there. And then the lower right-hand corner is Bill Greer. He may have slightly glanced back to the right and back forward at Z139, but it's not clear. So this was not included in our summary of reactions. But that the median frame here of all these is 143.5. I just want to quickly mention that 0.5 means it's the average of two frames. When I first started developing this, I shared it on a forum and how it projected into an early shot, and I got a lot of negative feedback on it from both sides of the fence. I mean, people said it was, it was just wrong, and I was starting to second guess myself. But I said, there's something here, and then there was one last person made a comment, and it was like, this is very interesting. I've had similar sites and opinions, and I thought, wow, all right, one person, and I thought, well, maybe I'm not crazy, and so I looked up who this guy was and got in touch with him, and it was Ken Sears, and he said, yeah, I've been looking at this for a few years, and I see these reactions too, and I think it's an earlier shot, and he even, I think, made a little article he printed out on Max Holland's Washington Decoded website where he talked about these. He just didn't know how to translate these into the trigger time of the shot. And so I said, all right, hey, send me your numbers, send me your individuals in the film and your numbers that you see them starting to react. And he did, and it's like my jaw dropped. It's like he had every one of these that I had, and within a frame or two, he had the same starter reaction. So I said, there's something here. And so when you look at a 143.5 here, it's because I ended up averaging both our observations to do the calculations. So that's why you get it'd be like 143 and 144. So they were very close, and that's why some of these have a 0.5 in it. So the previous slide was the observed starter reaction seen around the limo early in the film. This discusses what the likely basis for those reactions are, namely sound localization of an unexpected and concerning loud report. So again, I said likely because this isn't exact data. It's what would likely happen given reactions happening at that time. So it's very consistent with what we were seeing there, and this is what this is my opinion here. The narrow uniformity and the timing of the start of reactions, all within 0.55 seconds of each other, would indicate a common stimulus, but some apparent randomness with respect to head and body movement was seen. So, what would cause this lack of uniformity in these major and distinct early head turns? George Hickey looked left, Rosemary Willis looked right, President Kennedy glanced left, Jackie Kennedy looked left and then right, Roy Kellerman looked right, Nellie Conley looked right, John Conley looked left and then right. And these all happened within just about a half a second of each other, or about 0.6 seconds of each other. An unexpected first very loud report on Elm would be concerning to most and generate a desire to determine what the hell was that? So that's kind of, but it's kind of random. So why is there maybe some randomness there? And I want to address that here with sound localizations. For this dynamic, a common human sound localization technique of head turning is normally invoked. So let me talk about that briefly. Sound localization is largely achieved using interaural level differences, ILD, and interaural time differences, ITD. This diagram depicts ILD and ITD in the horizontal plane at ear level. And this just depicts a simple single source. It's no building reflections, no refractions to complicate it. This is even the very simple example. So what this example shows is, say somebody is facing forward and there's a sound source coming from forward right of you. The difference in the distance between the right ear and the left ear can play a role in your sound, your sound localization. So this right ear gets a direct path from the sound source. The left ear gets a detoured path. It's a little longer, and the ears are very sensitive. So this is a longer path, and sometimes you get a little shadow from the head as far as like the loudness of something is tapered because the head makes a shadow. But in each case, the right ear will hear a perceived sound that's louder because it's closer and sooner because it's closer than the left ear. So to the ears, a perceived sound loudness and time synchronization are a function of the distance the sound travels to reach each ear. The right ear hears the sound louder and sooner and uses that for directionality. It's most effective when the source is 90 degrees to the right or left of the face, because that stretches out this distance to the left ear a little further. However, locations directly in front or back, if you move the sound source to the front or the back, you'll see these two become equal. So they have similar sound arrival dynamics, and this can sometimes cause errors and even reversals on estimating in people's testimonies regarding the source location. This ILD and ITD are also compounded by a 3D effect when adding a vertical displacement of the sound. This symmetry leads to a cone of confusion with respect to localization. So you can look up cone of confusion and it'll explain it all. But basically, you have a theoretical cone shape that's going out, and any source of sound on that cone can have two identical interaural differences because the distances are equal. Say, for example, from this point, you got that distance to that ear and that distance to that ear. Well, that's the same as the base of the cone over here. That's the same as that and that. So you're going to get, there's a cone of confusion with equal equal sound arrivals depending on location. But when this happens, when there's some confusion, the natural way for humans to try to resolve location confusion is to turn their heads. That's just the natural thing what we do. You voluntarily turn your head. It's like, where the hell is that? Where'd it come from? I heard something. I didn't know where it came from. I got to look around, turn my head to resolve that. Uh, and a sound from behind you and elevated overhead can be the most difficult to localize. And the sound duration of a Carcano blast is about 5 milliseconds, which is complete before people can even react to turn their heads and try to localize getting another beam on where the sound comes from. So that's kind of I think, the explanation for why we had some random head motions looking other ways. It was just a sound localization dynamic. So here are the key points from section 1. Startle reactions are typically brief, jerk-like, with small flexion joint movements, not large rotational joint movements. John Connolly's early film reactions used in the past to estimate the first shot timing assumed an involuntary startle reaction instead of a voluntary reaction. A Zapruder film blur about the same time has a similar assumption of a Zapruder having an involuntary startle reaction, which caused the film blur at that time. However, early head and body reactions seen in the limo occupants were voluntary reactions and not startle. The uniformity in the start of these voluntary reactions, about 0.55 seconds from each other, indicates a common stimulus. So we need a new first shot timing estimate because we've been making using the wrong assumptions in the past. Turning one's head is the most common thing to do to localize sounds. The lack of uniformity in the head movements seen on the film are consistent with sound localization challenges. Some of the most difficult sounds to localize are those that are brief, come from behind, and elevated above the horizontal plane. And for those individuals, riding in or right behind the limo, all those conditions would come into play for a surprise rifle first shot from the 6th floor. Sorry. So these are some comments I made on all this. Head rotations looking around for the source of a loud bang is voluntary. But and a decision to do so might depend on what's the most concerning or what just takes the highest priority for you at that time. You make a decision on voluntarily what you want to do. Some people on the curb near the limo as it passed by might have wanted to keep their keen focus on the president and Jackie rather than look away for them trying to find out who threw a firecracker for the first shot. There was a lot of exciting visual stimuli going on right in front of them. So for the spectators to look around for a firecracker that was not yet perceived as any kind of a threat, that would miss their opportunity to see and wave at the president as he was going by just a few feet right in front of him. So I think you're going to see a lot of people like around the limo that they were there to see that limo and they were focused on all those dynamics of the limo, the flags, the president, Jackie. Everyone wanted to look at Jackie's dress, blah, blah. A firecracker goes off. Do you really give a rat's ass what kid did it? Yeah, it's irritating, but you're not going to make a decision to, hey, I'm more interested in some kid throwing a firecracker than I am in seeing Jackie's dress or JFK. So that's, some people will argue, well, not everyone is doing what they did. Yeah, and there's a reason for it. It's voluntary, and I think it depends on what grabs your attention at the time, what you want to focus on. So that's end of section 1. Now, section 2 is, this is the last half of the presentation, is the development of a mathematical model from historic reaction time data and how it's used to determine the first shot timing. So this is how we get it, estimating that first shot without using any eyewitness or ear witness testimony. The reaction time mathematical model is based off some historic data from perception reaction time, the PRT studies in traffic flow theory. PRT calculations are used in establishing safe highway design parameters and are very important with respect to designing around common experiences we see in traffic flow, like stopping distances and reaction times. So this stuff has been used decades in the reaction times in traffic flow theory. These PRT dynamics based on visual or audible stimuli that require braking in driving situations occur every day. Sometimes a stimulus is expected, and sometimes it's unexpected and a complete surprise. So here's some examples of stimuli that may evoke either an expected or unexpected reaction. A traffic light changes to orange or red just in front of you. Depending on if you're familiar with the area or you're going fast down a highway that has lights, you may not know when that's going to change. So they have to design light times and durations based on that. Sudden brake lights appearing right in front of you might cause a reaction. A sudden crashing sound nearby might cause a reaction. A loud horn starts blasting nearby might cause a reaction. Or a fire truck coming. So this just shows that you get a lot of these things, a lot of this reaction time stuff happens, and it's all built into traffic flow theory and the design of our streets and control light signals and all that. So reaction times to sound and visual stimulus are fairly similar, with reaction to a sound stimulus reported being a little faster, maybe 50 milliseconds, or less than a frame versus visual reactions. And this summarizes. Let's see. This summarizes some of the nomenclature, and some of it's not universally defined. So I'm going to briefly go over that. And this is based off the work of Roger J. Kaffa. His model for total perception reaction time. So I'm going to go over this again. The total perception reaction time, PRT, is the perception time plus the movement or reaction time. So that reaction time is actually the time it takes to do a movement or a response when you decide to do it. So total PRT is equal to PT plus RT. This is a quote from John Conley in a meeting he had. He commented on reacting to hearing the first shot. He said, I had time to think, I had time to react. So he was pretty sure that first shot didn't hit him, and this is how he described it. He was talking exactly about this. Perception time is the time he took to think about it. Presumably he defined it as a rifle, or at some point he thought it was a rifle. And then he had time to react, which was those reaction turnings. So that the PRT components and what we are looking for in film, I'm going to go over how that timeline flows again from left to right here, is you have the stimulus arrival. So this would be like a gunshot arrival, muzzle blast. Then you have people have this perception time. That's the mental processing time, or that latency where you're not moving, you're processing it, and that's the perception time. And then you start your movement. The start of voluntary response here is the start of the reaction time, or movement response time also. And then when that's done, the response is complete. So that's the perception reaction time component. So now, like in Wikipedia, you're going to find some people define this slightly different. They'll say, here's the onset of the stimulus, there's an encoding time in the brain, there's a decision time in the brain, and then there's this response time, emotion time afterwards. This is just a different way to define it, where the E plus D is really the perception time. That's when the mental processing time, and then the R is the response time. So if you go looking at this, just a heads up, some people define it slightly different, but the concepts are all the same. This is what we're looking for on the Zapruder film. It's the end of the mental processing time and the beginning of the voluntary responses, when those motions occurred in the film. And this is used on silent film, where we don't see or hear any gunshot stimulus. We only see the start of people's reactions to the stimulus. So that's what we're looking for in the film. Now this goes into some of the mathematical model things. It's a little technical. I'll try to clear it up some. But Coppa wrote a chapter for the U.S. Department of Transportation on human factors for traffic flow, and he did this model for the reaction time, PRT, and he shows the importance of the stimulus expectancy here. So in this graph, this table 3.2. He called it break PRT, a log normal transformation. He compiled a mixed set of 16 break PRT studies, a whole lot of data, which had either a surprise or expected stimulus happen. And it included the onset of movement time for braking from the foot, from the accelerator to the brake. And that's why he calls it brake PRT up here, because that's the movement time of moving the foot from the accelerator to the brake. And this is, well, let me go back on this one here. He broke it out, surprise versus expected, and you can see the huge difference in the reaction time, or the total perception reaction time was 1.3 seconds for surprise, 0.54 for expected. It's almost two and a half, 2.25 times more or longer reaction time if you're not expecting it. So that shows the sensitivity to reaction time to expectation. This is his mathematical model, which we don't need to worry about too much, but it's a probability density function. He calls it a log normal transformation. The reason it's called a log normal transformation is that it's not normally distributed, but if you take the logarithm of these values, it'll make it normal. And it's not normal because you got a barrier here. You can't have a reaction time that's less than 0, or you're cheating, or it's a false start. But if you were to take the log of 0, you get negative infinity. So that makes it that normal tail out. That converts it to a normal graph. But the thing here is that this is kind of like for a perception reaction time. This tells you the relative percent or probability or proportion of the population that has that perception reaction time, and its use is to really go over a little area from one point to another. So let me explain that a little bit. If you say I start at 1 and I want to know the probability of people that have a reaction from like plus or minus 0.3, 0.7 to 1.3, that probability would be equal to the area under that curve from those 2 points. So that's how this curve is really worked. You use it to get the probability within a certain range of perception reaction times. It's not meant to mean if you have exactly 1 second, the probability is 0.85. That's not the right way to read it. But anyway, this will tell you. You can see it gives you a general representation of how many of the population is reacting at a certain perception reaction time.
Right.
So another way. So we're taking that, and for the JFK model here, or this particular model, we've taken that mean movement time in brake PRT studies was estimated at 0.2 seconds. So that's going to be subtracted off. So I'm going to just have the perception time because I'm subtracting off 0.2 seconds from this. This is the base model, but we're taking that from perception reaction time to just a perception time. So we're going to have the model for when people start reacting, not when they're done reacting. But first, I want to review quickly these probability density curves on PRT will change as stimulus expectancy changes. After a surprise first shot, awareness and expectancy can rapidly change based on the first shot. So this method is only used for a first shot. Can't be used for shot 2 or 3. So here's that graph I just showed you. It was a probability density curve for a surprise stimulus, and it had the mean perception reaction time was 1.31, and the stimulus arrival here was very low or totally a surprise in his data. This was the expected stimulus data, where the stimulus had some mid-expectancy level, and the expectation could be anywhere from a few minutes to even a couple days. They had some knowledge that something was going to happen. So, and that's what you had the perception reaction time go way down to 0.54. Now that can even be extrapolated further, highly expected stimulus. And you can test this yourself. There's a web page called Human Benchmarking where they flash something on the screen and you click your mouse as fast as you can to get your response or reaction time. I call it a tap perception time here because you're tapping your mouse, your fingers right on it. But and this is probably for hundreds of thousands of people, the mean is 0.28 seconds for a highly expected stimulus. And what you'll notice on these is that, well, for one, the reaction time is highly dependent on expectation. And there's also variability from person to person because there's a population distribution. So perception time is not just simply one number for everybody. And the other thing is like at 0.1, you see that's the probability is about 0 for 100 milliseconds for any of these. That's what the Olympics use to disqualify people in starts of races. If you have a reaction time on those starting blocks at 100 milliseconds, you're out. That's because none of the population is expected to be able to do that. Even if you're extremely expecting it, that's still too fast. So this is an actual probability density versus perception time for a surprise stimulus. This is the model that we use for the JFK timing. The median of this model is 0.97 seconds, and the mean was 1.11. I guess here, on this one, one way to look at it is like if I was just to sample, say there were 600 people in Dealey Plaza, and we could sample, say 2/3 of them, sample 400 and measure everybody's reaction time, or perception time, I'm sorry, when they started to react to a stimulus. It would look something like this. This would be a random sampling of everybody that in Dealey Plaza. I get 400 people, and these would be their perception times that I would measure. So that kind of shows you how a histogram can kind of show you the shape of that curve. And if you were to look at say 0.7 to 1.3, like that 0.6 spread, or 0.55 seconds like we saw in the limo, you would expect a lot of reactions to be happening in that time frame. Correct. And that's the time frame we saw in the limo. And of course, the more sampling the more is better, but you can get a really good estimate on the median value for a skew distribution with just maybe 7 to 10 samples. And that's actually what we did with the Zapruder film. Okay, this just says we expect to see a lot in this 0.7 to 1.3 seconds around the median, and that's what we were seeing in it's about 10 frames, Zapruder frames. So this, in effect, this is finalizing the first shot timing estimate by visually aligning the median values of two graphs that are time scaled the same. The reason we use the median value to match these up is the median is a little preferred for centrality of a distribution if it's skewed, like a log normal curve. So here we start with a graph, this light gray grid here, which is Zapruder frames, and the starter reactions are plotted as a histogram here, blue blocks. So those are the people we saw with their starter reactions. We use a copy of that perception time function graph, and it's overlaid on this graph with the same time scale on the x-axis. So the 18.3 frames per second on this graph matched the perception time x-axis scale in seconds. So you match those two together, and then the two graphs are aligned using their median values. And this is what happens when you do that. You get the data from the Zapruder film, you get the mathematical model, and what happens when you align the medians of the film samples, here 143.5 versus the population of 0.97 seconds. This will let the perception time model, time zero, will be a pointer for you to the stimulus origination time on the Zapruder frame. So when we overlay the medians, this says we follow this for a pointer for time zero. When did that stimulus happen so that these people are reacting like this? And you go to zero here and it says, well, it's about 125.7. So that's where you get a stimulus arrival time to the limo at ZEQ 125.7. That's when the muzzle blast hit them. And then they started to react that much later. So using the best evidence as to the gun location, one can subtract off a muzzle blast travel time of 1.7 frames from the Texas School Book Depository, and that gives you your first shot trigger time estimate at Z 124. So this is how the mathematical model points exactly to Z 124. As a quick validation check on the model, because people are going to say, well, how do we know it's right? The perception time distribution I showed you is used on other video studies showing a start of voluntary reactions for people reacting to a loud surprise sound stimulus. In two studies, the loud sound was not from a gunshot, but from a camera that was, or from a other loud sound. And in one study, the camera was close enough you could see startles happening. So this is kind of some of the validation work. The red star here was the Zapruder film data, which I showed earlier. The model estimated a 0.97 seconds median value. The green plus or cross was 5 random internet videos that showed a surprise sound and some startle reactions, and that is how randomly from internet videos we're starting to show up in here as well. And the median of those was 0.95. The orange hash mark was a bombing in a plaza demonstration. This actually happened in Turkey when this work was done. 7 samples with sound were plotted. So you really didn't need to use the model as a pointer, because when you had the sound, you knew exactly when the original the sound stimulus started. But in any case, you could look at what the median values of these points were, and they're all right around 0.97. So all this data is matching up very well with the theoretical or the data derived from Kappa's equation. This Dayton, Ohio shooting one, this was 7 samples without sound and then with sound. This was, I'm just going to take, I don't want to take a lot of time, but this is kind of like a Twilight Zone thing for me. On a Sunday in August 2019, a Sunday morning, I got an email from the editor of the journal that published our publication, and he said, well, we decided to accept your work. We think it has some merit, and it might even be able to be used on some modern day cases with all the surveillances and cameras that are around. That was that morning. And then just later on that day, the news broke out that night. Overnight, there was a mass shooting in Dayton, Ohio, just down the road from me. 26 people were shot, 9 fatalities. It was a really bad thing. And they came out and they said, well, we think it was around one person. We think the overall shooting, because there was back and forth shooting, the police shot him down. Took about 30 seconds. And I thought, oh, that's horrible. And then a couple of days later, they came out with some surveillance videos, and one of them was of a patio of a bar that showed 7 people reacting. It's a silent surveillance video reacting on this patio. And then a few seconds later, you could see the police running into frame, and you could see that when the last shot from the police was made by the police's hand reaction to firing his pistol, that was the end of it. So using that, I could use this method to estimate the start of the shooting and then the final shot we saw on film. So we could estimate the duration of this event. Uh, and it came out it came out 32.67 seconds. And I wrote the lead investigator and I said, hey, you estimated at 32. I got a new method that said 32.6 seconds, 6, 7 seconds. It's a little longer than when you got, but very close. And he didn't get back to me. But a week later, a another video came out with sound, another surveillance video. It didn't show these people at all. It was down the road, but it had sound, and it turned out you could plug that into a sound software, and it came out 32.616 seconds. It was the entire shooting duration from the start of the gunman to the last police shot. And the spooky thing about that was the difference between the estimate I made and the actual based on a video was 0.054 seconds. So if you're familiar with the Zapruder frames timing, you'll recognize that number. It's just a coincidence, but it's just really weird. But the bottom line here is this method is quite reliable to figure out these distributions and shooting timings. This is the key points from the model development section 2. The method effectively uses historic surprise voluntary reaction data taken from PRT test and having reactions to a concerning stimulus and generates a perception time model used to make a narrow time estimate for the first shot in the JFK assassination based on observed start of reaction seen on film after the first shot. For a visual reference here, at a trigger time of Z124, the estimated limo position is viewed from the sniper's nest as depicted in the photo here, taken from a Secret Service crime scene reconstruction. At this time, there's nothing between the sniper's nest and the presidential limo to deflect a bullet. But this is what the work says. This is when that first shot was triggered.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and so here's the overall takeaways from this study, delving into the first shot timing. The PRT analysis can using forensic photographic evidence in conjunction with human reactions, and it does not require the use of any eyewitness or ear witness testimony, can give you a good estimate. The perception time analysis here directly indicated the first shot was triggered at Z124, about a half second before Z133. The overall duration of the shooting timeline on Elm Street was about 10.2 seconds. There was plenty of time to get off 3 clear shots from the Texas School Book Depository sniper's nest with a Carcano rifle in 10.2 seconds. This is 82% more time than the 5.6 estimate that has been originally estimated. Using the definitive excuse for a second gunman, there was not enough time for one person to do the shooting of those 3 shots is clearly wrong, and that needs to be dismissed and just retired. It's no longer relevant. If the second shot was triggered in a time frame around Z219 and the third shot triggered around 310, the timing of the first shot was Z124. This makes the 3 shots equally spaced at about 5 seconds between each shot. This apparent confusion in the motions of the people in the limos we discussed is based on sound localization issues. The proximity of their movements with respect to 0.55 seconds is expected based on that population's perception times. We talked about that, the perception time model and the timing, and you're going to get a lot of people that should be reacting right in that time frame. The Z124 early first shot, which is not on film, further generates significant and serious doubt about the acoustic analysis, as it appears the acoustic analysis generated multiple errors by claiming the early startle film blurs seen on film aligned with their acoustic shots. This resulted in an acoustic false positive at Z157, an acoustic false negative or false positive at 173, and acoustic false negative at Z124. That basically summarizes the research, and that's the end. I I'm very, very convinced, based on the analysis that I've seen, that first shot was around Z124.
Well, it's a great presentation. It's really, really very interesting. So, that's a very early shot. So, what do you think happened with that shot, and where did it go?
Uh, yeah, okay. I was afraid you were going to ask that. I expected it though.
Yeah,
I mean, I have to ask myself then, that was there. What happened? How could a sniper have, the real question is, how could a sniper have missed the entire limo? There was nothing there. And where would the bullet have gone? Now, the reaction time data does not address these questions. It addresses the questions of when, not, you know, how or why or anything like that. But it can suggest an Occam's razor based on the first shot, timing, and the limo position. And this kind of goes back to that Garner and Bevel thing. If you've got the right timing of your crime scene, and they do that in every crime scene uh, film or TV program, that's the backbone of the case, is that time scene, or that timeline. If you get that right, a lot of times other things start coming into focus that you would have missed before.
right,
So here, the only way I look at it, to answer your question, Brad, is look at it from an Occam's razor standpoint, and I think it's a minimal limo miss, and that's based on the sniper was good enough, or at least good enough that he could get close to hitting the moving limo, but simply missed it. And by missing the president by about 3 feet or 36 inches, because there's nothing deflecting him there. So how the Occam's razor work, this Occam's razor would work, was you would start with if his target was the back of the president's head, and I expand a circle out from that, where does that circle first miss the limo? And that's this magenta circle. It would miss the limo down to the right, about up where Conley was sitting, or maybe overhead on the top side. That would be a minimal limo miss, Occam's razor.
right.
If it hit up here, I mean, it's possible, maybe it risks splattering people. I personally think it's more likely to hit on the lower side, because as you're coming across, the limo is kind of accelerating upward and away at this point. So I would think he would have missed down to the right. And if you measure from the president's head outward to that trajectory, that's only about 36 inches perpendicular to the bullet path. So he would only have to miss, I mean, that's a lot, but he would only have to miss by 36 inches to miss the entire limo. And it would kind of go in the shadow area. It could almost go underneath the limo entirely. But that was my Occam's razor as to where it might have went. Now, even without knowing the exact sighting situation here on the scope or iron sights, what he used and what condition they were in, and this is, I think, could the extent of his misses simply be proportional to the target angular velocity? So even though, I think there may be a lot of credibility to he was rushing a shot in that open space, or he was jiggling a little because it was the first shot. Um, I think it's probably a multivariable thing, but I think it's probably one of the more important variables is just he simply missed due to the target angular velocity. Now here, these numbers are what I'm going to use for a graph, and I won't go through it all, but if you consider how far the distance at the different shots, how fast the limo was going, and you can get a calculation of the angular velocity of the target, the limo or JFK, the back of JFK's head. You can plot that for each three shots, and if for the first shot he missed by 36 inches, the second shot on the lower neck, upper back, 8 inches from the middle of the head. And the third shot was close, within 2 inches of the middle of the head, if you want to go up or down, depending on your preference.
Right.
you plot that, and this is what you get. You get for this would be a steady target, a non-moving target. You would think in that range he'd get down there close to less than anything. He'd get really close to hitting target. For shot 3, which was about what did I have it at? I'm trying to
2 inches.
Yeah, 2 inches, about 2 inches at an angular velocity of a little under 1, and that's that point. Shot 2 is like an angular for 8 inches. You get an angular velocity up here of a little less than 3, and at shot 1 out here, it's 36 inches at like 5.5 degrees per second, or 5.44. So it looks like that his misses are almost proportional, maybe a little higher than proportional. Like the faster it went, the further he missed. But if you just look at that, there seems to be a trend there that he's missing as a function of the angular velocity of his target. And I don't think he trained on moving targets that much. So the interesting point here is in skeet shooting, which is shooting clay pigeons with shotguns. This is the target's angular velocity at the center hoop, which is the first station in a ski shooting thing when using a shotgun. That is, a clay pigeon's a little smaller than a head, but he's shooting at a head that's moving faster than a clay pigeon on a skeet, on the first station in skeet shooting. And so basically, he probably would have just missed because he was effectively shooting skeet using a rifle. It's not easy to do. So on the next, on this next one, this is the last slide on it. It's like, is there any evidence of where it would have went? The previous slide was like, well, why did he miss? This is, well, where would it have gone? If you take this minimal miss diagram and you look at where you expect it to hit, it would have been right about here, maybe between or up around Conley or Kellerman or somewhere in there. And you consider Lucian and Michael Haig's research that they did, and I mentioned Faye Chisholm here because she had a interesting testimony on this. But Lucian Haig tested a bullet into approximately equal to this pavement at that angle, and what he found was really interesting is the bullet just vaporized, disappeared, it totally fragmented, and the pavement kind of shot up in smoke and spinning pieces of fragments here, almost straight up. And it left like a 3-inch, splotch or divot in the road when he tried to replicate this. So what this would suggest doing is we check the road in this area here and the side of the limo, because if it hit there, this stuff was, a little bit of it could have hit the limo for any damage. Now, I just saw this. I had these pictures in the past, but I just saw this recently. And in fact, it was a Michel Gagne webpage where I was just cruising around looking at some of his stuff, and he had a pretty high resolution picture of this Secret Service reenactment here. And I was looking at if I look closely up in this point, maybe a couple feet, if these lane markers are here, and I go up a couple feet and over a couple feet, right at that minimum miss, over a couple feet and back here to the end of the lane marker behind the cop in the upper photo, I see like a 3-inch divot in the road right there. And on a secondary photo, it's the same thing. A couple feet up and over, there's a pretty significant divot in the road. Now, this doesn't prove anything, but it's very interesting that actually I'm seeing some road damage. So that point translates down to this point on the road, which also translates to this point on the road, exactly where the minimal miss would have been. Now, there is one other thing I'm going to mention. There is I did find another discussion on limo damage. The other thing was limo damage. I typed up an article on limo damage on this website here, and there apparently is some slight limo damage right above, right between Conley and Kellerman on a transition piece on the side of the limo up high here, like right about in here. And it shows up in high resolution pictures after Dealey Plaza, but does not show up on high resolution pictures before Dealey Plaza. So given this, I've got the two things I'm looking for. I mean, this is not definitive enough that I could swear, but it's awful interesting that I see a divot in the road about like a 3-inch divot that you get with testing, and I see some potential light damage on the outside of the limo that looks like it could be light damage from some spray coming off the surface of the road. So that is why this would be my best bet now, but I think more evidence would be helpful. But I think this is a good possibility of the exact timing. I'm really pretty confident in, and the where it went and what happened and all that. There is some evidence that even kind of supports it. So that's it.
I'm hoping that people who watch this video may come forth with other pictures or photographs to either support or not support the thesis here. But this is very, very fascinating. It's a great presentation.
Well, thanks. I mean, it sold me on it because the more I got into it, the more I believed in what I was finding out. And there is other validation points that I have that I just don't have time to go over about that supports the timing part of it,
right,
at Z124. So that's it. I mean, I I don't have anything else to add right now.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, do you want to come back and do another presentation later on the second and third shots?
Yeah, I could, because I do have some material on that, and it wouldn't be quite as long as this one, but I think there's some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, I think that'd be very, very interesting. Well, look, we'll get this out and we'll see what people's reactions are, and hopefully there'll be some more material coming through.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. It's just fabulous to have this opportunity. Thanks a lot.